Hey, English students, Mr. Williamson again. I was thinking that maybe some of you might, enjoy or benefit from having a read aloud version of our next story, which is Daughter of Invention. So I thought I'd give it a shot. I'm only human, so if I stumble on some words or some names along the way, just, just let me stumble and I'll keep going. All right, here we go. Daughter of Invention. From How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accents. So this is a chapter from a longer work from a book. It's by Julia Alvarez. As you're reading, you should highlight words and phrases that help you understand the characters and the conflicts they face. Her daughters would seek her out at night when she seemed to have a moment to talk to them. They were having trouble at school, or they wanted her to persuade their father and give them permission to go into the city, or to a shopping mall, or a movie, in broad daylight. Mammy. Laura would wave them out of her room. The problem with you girls, the problem boiled down to the fact that they wanted to become Americans, and their father, and their mother too at first, would have none of it. You girls are going to drive me crazy, she threatened, if they kept nagging. When I end up in Bellevue, you'll be sorry. She spoke in English when she argued with them, and her English was a mismatch of mixed-up idioms and sayings that showed she was "green behind the ears," as she called it. If her husband insisted she speak in Spanish to the girls so they wouldn't forget their native tongue, she'd snap, "When in Rome, do unto the Romans." Yo-Yo, the big mouth, had become the spokesman for her sisters, and she stood her ground in that bedroom. "We're not going to that school anymore, Mammy." "You have to." Her eyes would widen with worry. "In this country, it is against the law not to go to school." "You want us to get thrown out?" "You want us to get killed? Those kids were throwing stones today." "Sticks and stones don't break bones," she chanted. Yo-Yo could tell, though, by the look on her face, it was as if one of those stones the kids had aimed at her daughters had hit her, but she always pretended they were at fault. "What did you do to provoke them? It takes two to tangle, you know." "Thanks. Thanks a lot, Mom." Yo-Yo stormed out of the room and into her own. Her daughters never called her Mom except when they wanted her to feel how much she had failed them in this country. She was a good enough mammy, fussing and scolding and giving advice, but a terrible girlfriend parent, a real failure of a mom. Back Back she went to her pencil and pad, scribbling and tisking and tearing off sheets, finally giving up and taking up her New York Times. Some nights, though, if she got a good idea, she'd rush into Yo-Yo's room, a flushed look on her face, her tablet of paper in her hand, a cursory knock on the door she'd just thrown open. "Do I have something to show you, Cuquetta?" Forgive me if I mispronounced that. This was Yo-Yo's time to herself after she finished her homework while her sisters were still downstairs watching TV in the basement. Hunched over her small desk, the overhead light turned off, her desk lamp poignantly lighting only her paper, the rest of the room in warm, soft, uncreated darkness. She wrote her secret poems in her new language. "You're going to ruin your eyes," Laura began, snapping on the overly bright overhead light, scaring off whatever shy passion Yo-Yo, with the blue thread of her writing, had just begun coaxing out of a labyrinth of feelings. "Oh, Mammy," Yo-Yo cried out, her eyes blinking up at her mother. "I'm writing." "Ay, Kikita." That was her communal pet name for whoever was in her favor. "Kikita, when I make $1 million, buy you your very own typewriter." Yo-Yo had been nagging her mother for one just like the one her father had bought to do his order forms at home. Gravy on the turkey was what she called it when someone was buttering her up. She buttered and poured. "I'll hire you your very own typist." Down she plopped on the bed and held out her pad. "Take a guess, Kukita." I'm going to have to look up how to pronounce that word. I know I'm probably mispronouncing it. Let me start over. Down she plopped on the bed and held out her pad. Take a guess, Kikita. Yo-Yo studied the rough sketch a moment. Soap sprayed from the nozzle head of a shower when you turn the knob a certain way. Instant coffee with the creamer already mixed in. Time-release water capsules for your potted plants when you were away. A keychain with a timer that would go off when your parking meter was about to expire. The ticking would help you find your keys easily if you mislaid them. The famous one, famous only in hindsight, was the stick person dragging a square by a rope, a suitcase with wheels. "Oh, of course," Yo-Yo said, humoring her. "What every household needs, a shower like a car wash, keys ticking like a bomb, luggage on a leash." By now it had become something of a family joke. Their Thomas Edison mammy, their Benjamin Franklin mom. Just for clarification, seems like the mother is kind of known in the family for coming up with inventions, kind of ideas. So that whole paragraph there was um, the daughter kind of almost like mockingly thinking about what things that the mother would invent. Her face fell. Come on now, use your head. One more wrong guess and she'd show Yo-Yo, pointing with her pencil to the different highlights of this incredible new wonder. Remember that time we took the car to Bear Mountain and we realized that we had forgotten to pack an opener with our picnic? Her daughters kept correcting her, but she insisted this was how it should be said. When we were ready to eat, we didn't have any way to open the refreshment cans. This before flip-top lids, which she claimed had crossed her mind. You know what this is now? Yo-Yo shook her head. It's a car bumper, but see, this part is a removable can opener. So simple, and yet so necessary, eh? Yeah, Mammy. You should patent it. Yo-Yo shrugged as her mother tore off a scratch paper and folded it carefully corner to corner as if she were going to save it, but then she tossed it into the basket on her way out of the room and gave a little laugh like a disclaimer. It's half of one or 2 dozen of another. Just so you know, I'm sure you know, but if you don't know, if you a patent when Yo-Yo says you should patent it, that's what you do if you have an idea like an invention and you don't want anyone to be able to steal your idea. You patent it. That way you have a kind of like a legal ownership of that idea. All right, so we have a question at this point. Which activity helps a mother feel comfortable in America? And I'm not answering that, but you will when you come back to this lesson. Moving on to the next page. None of her daughters was very encouraging. They resented her spending time on those dumb inventions. Here they were trying to fit in American among Americans. I'm sorry, here they were trying to fit in America among Americans. They needed to help they needed help figuring out who they were, why the Irish kids whose grandparents had been mixed were calling them Spicks. Why had they come to this country in the first place? Important, crucial, final things, and here was their own mother who didn't have a second to help them puzzle out any of this. Inventing gadgets to make life easier for the American moms. Sometimes Yo-Yo challenged her. Why, Mammy? Why do it? You're never going to make money. The Americans have already thought of everything. You know that. Maybe not. Maybe, just maybe, there's something they've missed that's important. With patience and calm, even a burro can climb a palm. This last was one of her many Dominican sayings she had imported into her scrambled English. But what's the point? Yo-Yo persisted. Point? Point? Does everything need a point? Why do you write poems? Yo-Yo had to admit it was her mother who had the point there. Still, in the hierarchy of things, a poem seemed much more important than a potty that played music when a toilet training toddler went into his bowl. They talked about it among themselves, the four girls, as they often did now, about the many puzzling things in this new country. Better she invents the wheel than be on our cases all the time, the oldest Carla observed. In the close quarters of an American nuclear family, their mother's prodigious energy was becoming a real drain on their self-determination. Let her have a project. What harm could she do? And besides, she needed that acknowledgement. It had come to her automatically in the old country from being de la Torre, Garcia de la Torre. Laura would enunciate carefully, giving her maiden as well as married name when they first arrived. But the blank smiles had never heard of her name. She would show them. She would prove to these Americans what a smart woman could do with a pencil and pad. She had a near miss once. Every night she liked to read the New York Times in bed before turning off her light to see what the Americans were up to. One night she let out a yelp to wake up her husband beside her. He sat bolt upright, reaching for his glasses, which in his haste he knocked across the room. Que pasa? Que pasa? What is wrong? There was terror in his voice, the same fear she'd heard in the Dominican Republic before they left. They had been watched there. He was followed. They could not talk, of course, though they had whispered to each other in fear at night in the dark bed. Now in America, he was safe, a success even. His Centro de Medicina in the Bronx was thronged with the sick and the homesick, yearning to go home again. But in dreams, he went back to those awful days and long nights, and his wife's screams confirmed his secret fear. They had not gotten away after all. The sim had come for them at last. Ay, Kukul, remember how I showed you that suitcase with little wheels so we should not have to carry those heavy bags when we traveled? Someone stole my idea and made a million. She shook the paper in his face. See, see? This man was no Bobo. He didn't put all his pokers on a back burner. I kept telling you, one of these days my ship would pass me by in the night. She wagged her finger at her husband and daughters, laughing all the while, one of those eerie laughs crazy people in movies laugh. The four girls had congregated in a room. They eyed their mother and each other. Perhaps they were all thinking the same thing. Wouldn't it be weird and sad if Mammy did end up in Bellevue? Yeah, yeah, she waved them out of her room at last. There is no use trying to drink spilt milk, that's for sure. It was the suitcase rollers that stopped Laura's hand. She had weather-vaned a minor brainstorm, and yet this plagiarist had gotten all the credit and the money. What use was it trying to complete with I'm sorry. What use was it trying to compete with the Americans? They would always have the head start. It was their country, after all. Best stick close to home. She cast her sights about her daughter's duct and found her husband's office in need. Several days a week, dressed professionally in a white smock with a little name tag pinned on the lapel, a shopping bag full of cleaning materials and rags, she rode with her husband in his car to the Bronx. On the way, she organized the glove compartment or took off the address stickers from the magazines for the waiting room because she had read somewhere how by means of these stickers drug addict patients found out where doctors lived and burglarized their homes looking for syringes. At night she did the books, filling in columns with how much money they had made that day. Who had time to be inventing silly things? So a lot happens on this page. I'm going to stop for just a minute just to kind of talk about it. This whole scene where, she has this idea, the mother has this idea about um, creating suitcases with wheels on them so that you can just pull your suitcase. Now, I know that's common, that's just common these days, but there was a time where suitcases didn't have wheels and you had to carry your suitcases. So this idea would have been kind of radical for its day. And she's in bed reading the New York Times, which is like a newspaper, and she sees that somebody else had beat her to the punch. Somebody else had already invented this suitcase with wheels, and she screams out, you know, in anger, frustration, or whatever. She screams out, and when she screams, she wakes up her husband, and kind of scream kind of terrifies him. And this whole part where that talks of kind of does a small flashback back to where he was in the Dominican Republic, I guess. That it the way he reacts to it, he's scared, like the scream scares him, and he has these kind of bad, upsetting flashbacks about what life was like there because uh, obviously it says right there, it says there was terror in his voice, the same fear she'd heard in the Dominican Republic before they left. They had been watched there. He was followed. They could not talk. So they obviously in the Dominican Republic, they were living under a kind of like an oppressive government, um, a tyrannical government, if you will, and that kind of gives us a hint, a clue as to why they left and went to America. You know, that's what we you can infer from that. Um, but the reason she's upset is because somebody stole her suitcase idea. And then this part right here, where it says she starts talking about other things like best stick close to home. She cast her sights about her daughter's duct and found her husband's office in need. Several days a week, dressed professionally in white smock with a little name tag pinned on the lapel, and starts listing all these little chores things she does. And it's kind of like the mother convincing herself, well, who has time to worry about inventing things? There's too much going on here at the house. I've got other things I need to be doing. So Eva says that right there. She says, I just saw it. Yeah, at night she did the books, filling in columns and how much money they had made that day. Who had time to be inventing silly things? So, in a way, that's kind of like her trying to, I don't know, maybe make herself feel better about the fact that her her invention isn't gonna, it's not gonna be her invention. She missed that opportunity. Just thought I'd stop and try to elaborate on that. Moving on to the next page. She did take up her pencil and pad one last time, but it was to help one of her daughters out. In ninth grade, Yo-Yo was chosen by her English teacher, Sister Mary Joseph, to deliver the Teacher's Day address at the school assembly. Back in the Dominican Republic growing up, Yo-Yo had been a terrible student. No one could ever get her to sit down to a book. But in New York, she needed to settle down. She needed to settle somewhere, and since the natives were unfriendly and the country inhospitable, she took root in the language. By high school, the nuns were reading her stories and compositions out loud in the English class. So Yo-Yo has the skills of writer. But the specter of delivering a speech, brown-nosing the teachers jammed her imagination. At first she didn't want to, and then she couldn't seem to write that speech. She should have thought of it as a great honor, as her father called it, but she was mortified. She still had a slight accent, and she did not like to speak in public, subjugating herself to her classmates' ridicule. It also took no great figuring to see that to deliver a eulogy for a convent full of crazy old overweight nuns was no way to endear herself to her peers. So Yo-Yo has to give a speech. She's been given the honor of giving a speech in her English class, but she's nervous about it because she is worried about being made fun of by her classmates. But she didn't know how to get out of it. Night after night, she sat at her desk, hoping to polish off some quick, non-committal little speech, but she couldn't get anything down. The weekend before the assembly, Monday morning, Yo-Yo went into a panic. Her mother would just have to call in tomorrow and say Yo-Yo was in the hospital, in a coma. Laura tried to calm her down. Just remember how Mr. Lincoln couldn't think of anything to say at the Gettysburg. But then, bang! Fourscore and once upon a time ago, she began reciting, something is going to come if you just relax. You'll see, like the Americans say, necessity is the daughter of invention. I'll help you. That weekend, her mother turned all her energy towards helping Yo-Yo write her speech. "Please, Mammy, just leave me alone, please," Yo-Yo pleaded with her, but Yo-Yo would get rid of the goose only to have to contend with the gander. Her father kept poking his head in the door just to see if Yo-Yo had fulfilled your obligations, a phrase he had used when the girls were younger, and he checked to see whether they had gone to the bathroom before a car trip. Several times that weekend, around supper table, he recited his own high school valedictorian speech. He gave Yo-Yo pointers on delivery notes on the great orators and their tricks. Humbleness and praise and falling silent with great emotion were his favorites. Just so you know, that this expression here, um, get rid of the goose only to have to contend with the gander. That just it's just an expression. It's an idiom, which we will talk about in more detail. It's just an idiom that means it's like get rid of one problem only to have another problem come in. So like what's going on there is that Yo-Yo really doesn't want to be have her parents bothering her while she's trying to write the speech, and she'd get tell her mother to leave, but then her mother will leave, and then her father will pop in. So Laura sat across the table, the only one who seemed to be listening to him. Yo-Yo and her sisters were forgetting a lot of their Spanish, and their father's formal, florid diction was hard to understand. But Laura smiled softly to herself and turned the lazy Susan at the center of the table around and around as if it were the prime mover, the first gear of her attention. That Sunday evening, Yo-Yo was reading some poetry to get herself inspired. Whitman's poems in an old book with an engraved cover her father had picked up in a thrift shop next to his office. Whitman is Walt Whitman, just so you know. He was a very well-known poet, still is a very well-known poet. I mean, he's passed away. He's a very old poet, but his poetry is still very well known, and um, we will more than likely read some of his poems later on in my class, but here we go. So she's reading some of his poems. I celebrate myself and sing myself. He most honors my style who learns under it to destroy the teacher. The poet's words shocked and thrilled her. She had gotten used to the nuns, a literature of appropriate sentiments, poems with a message, expurgated text, but here was a flesh and blood man, belching and laughing and sweating in poems. Who touches this book touches a man. Got a little audio thing here. Should we click it? I'll let you do that when you get here, when you read it on your own. I'll just keep reading. That night, at last, she started to write, recklessly, 3, 5 pages, looking up once, only to see her father passing by the hall on tiptoe. When Yo-Yo was done, she read over her words, and her eyes filled. She finally sounded like herself in English. As soon as he had finished that first draft, she called her mother to her room. Laura listened attentively while Yo-Yo read the speech out loud, and in the end her eyes were glistening too. Her face was soft and warm and proud. "Aye, Yo-Yo, you are going to be the one to bring our name to the headlights in this country. This is a beautiful, beautiful speech. I want for you, your father, to hear it before he goes to sleep, and I will type it for you, all right?" See how I'm doing on my timing here. Recording. I am still recording. Good. Let's word at a time now. So Yo-Yo wrote a speech that her mom is proud of. Down the hall they went, mother and daughter, faces flushed with accomplishment, into the master bedroom where Carlos was propped up on his pillows, still awake, reading the Dominican papers, already days old. Now that the dictatorship had been toppled, he had become interested in his country's fate again. The interim government was going to hold the first free elections in 30 years. History was in the making. Freedom and hope were in the air again. There was still some question in his mind whether or not he might move his family back, but Laura had gotten used to the life here. She did not want to go back to the old country where, delator or not, she was only a wife and a mother, and a failed one at that, since she had never provided the required son. Better an independent nobody than a high-class house slave. She did not come straight out and disagree with her husband's plans. Instead, she fussed with him about reading the papers in bed, soiling their sheets with those poorly printed foreign tabloids. The Times is not that bad, she'd claim if her husband tried to humor her by saying they share the same dirty habit. So here, um, it looks like in the Dominican Republic, um, the dictatorship has been toppled, meaning the uh, the the bad government, if you will, the government that they left the Dominican Republic from to get away from has been defeated or dismantled, and that a new government was going to come in, and they're going to have their first free elections. So the father is kind of desiring to go back to the Dominican Republic, but his wife is has become kind of accustomed to American life, and she likes the uh, the kind of person she is here in America. So she's not as enthused about going back. The minute Carlos saw his wife and daughter filing in, he put his paper down and his face brightened as if at long last his wife had delivered the son, and that was the news she was bringing him. His teeth were already grinning from the glass of water next to his bedside lamp, so he lisped when he said, "His speech, his speech. It is so beautiful, Cuckoo," Laura coached him, turning the sound on his TV off. She sat down at the foot of the bed. Yo-Yo stood before both of them, blocking their view of the soldiers and helicopters landing amid silenced gun reports and explosions. A few weeks ago, it had been the shores of the Dominican Republic. Now it was the jungles of Southeast Asia they were saving. Her mother gave her the nod to begin reading. So this is kind of similar in this one context to the Scarlet Ibis. Like in the Scarlet Ibis, World War One was in the background of the main narrative, and it's just like something that was happening in the background. And here we got this revolution going on in the Dominican Republic, and it's spreading, and it's they're fighting for democracy there, and that's going on in the kind of like the background of this smaller family story. All right, Yo-Yo's getting ready to read the speech. Yo-Yo didn't need much encouragement. She put her nose to the fire, as her mother would have said, and read from start to finish without looking up. When she concluded, she was a little embarrassed at the pride she took in her own words. She pretended to quibble with a phrase or two, then looked questioningly to her mother. Laura's face was radiant. Yo-Yo turned to share her pride with her father. The expression on his face shocked both mother and daughter. Carlos's toothless mouth had collapsed into a dark zero. His eyes bored into Yo-Yo, then shifted to Laura. In a barely audible Spanish, as if secret microphones or informers were all about, he whispered to his wife, "You will permit her to read that?" Laura's eyebrows shot up, her mouth fell open. In the old country, any whisper of a challenge to authority could bring the secret police and their black VWs, but this was America. People could say what they thought. "What is wrong with her speech?" Laura questioned him. "What is wrong with her speech?" Carlos wagged his head at her. His anger was always more frightening in his broken English, as if he had mutilated the language in his fury, and now there was nothing to stand between them and his raw, dumb anger. "What is wrong? I will tell you what is wrong. It shows no gratitude. It is boastful. I celebrate myself. The best students learns to destroy the teacher." He mocked Yo-Yo's plagiarized words. "This is insubordinate. It's improper. It is disrespecting of her teachers." In his anger, he had forgotten his fear of lurking spies. Each wrong he voiced was a decibel higher than the last outrage. Finally, he shouted at Yo-Yo, "As your father, I forbid you to make that speech." Laura leapt to her feet, a sign that she was about to deliver her own speech. She was a small woman, and she spoke all her pronouncements standing up, either for more projection or as a carryover from her girlhood in convent schools, where one asked for and literally took the floor in order to speak. She stood by Yo-Yo's side, shoulder to shoulder. They looked down at Carlos. "That is no tone of voice," she began. But now Carlos was truly furious. It was bad enough that his daughter was rebelling, but here was his own wife joining forces with her. Soon he would be surrounded by a house full of independent American women. He too leapt from the bed, throwing off his covers. The Spanish newspapers flew across the room. He snatched the speech out of Yo-Yo's hand, held it before the girl's wide eyes, a vengeful, mad look in his own. And then once, twice, three, four, countless times, he tore the speech into shreds. So I guess the father didn't like the speech. He tore it up. Hmm. How would you react in a situation like that if you had written something you were proud of and somebody you cared about tore it up? That's pretty harsh. Are you crazy? Laura lunged at him. Have you gone mad? That is her speech for tomorrow. You have torn up. Have you gone mad? He shook her away. You were going to let her read that insult to her teachers. Insult to her teachers? Laura's face had crumpled up like a piece of paper. On it was written a love note to her husband, an unhappy, haunted man. This is America, Peppy. America. You're not in a savage country anymore. Meanwhile, Yo-Yo was on her knees, weeping wildly, collecting all the little pieces of her speech, hoping that she could put it back together before the assembly tomorrow morning. But not even a Sibyl, I guess. Let's see what that is. I'm curious. A female prophet. I did not know that. That's a new word for me. I guess it's Sibyl? I'll have to look it up. Okay, but not even a Sibyl could have made sense of those tiny scraps of paper. All hope was lost. He broke it! He broke it! Yo-Yo moaned as she picked up a handful of pieces. Probably, if she had thought a moment about it, she would not have done what she did next. She would have realized her father had lost brothers and friends to the dictator Trujillo. For the rest of his life, he would be haunted by blood in the streets and late night disappearances. Even after all these years, he cringed if a black Volkswagen passed him on the streets. He feared anyone in uniform, the meter maid giving out parking tickets, a museum guard approaching to tell him not to get too close to his favorite Goya. So you can see that the father is scarred. His the fear and violence that he suffered in his homeland really affected the man he's become. And you can see that there's a little note here. So whenever you're reading and you see these little highlighted parts, click them. They're here to help you. You can see Carlos continues to feel unsafe because of the suffering he and his family experienced in the Dominican Republic. Even though she is young, Yo-Yo is very much aware of the horrors her family faced before moving to America. On her knees, Yo-Yo thought of the worst thing she could say to her father. She gathered a handful of scraps, stood up, and hurled them in his face. In a low, ugly whisper, she pronounced Trujillo's hated nickname. I guess it's Chapita. You're just another Chapita. It took Yo-Yo's father only a moment to register the loathsome nickname before he came after her. Down the halls they raced, but Yo-Yo was quicker than he and made it into her room just in time to lock the door as her father threw his weight against it. He called down curses on her head, ordered her on his authority as to her father to open the door. He throttled the doorknob, but all to no avail. Her mother's love of gadgets saved Yo-Yo's hide that night. Laura had hired a locksmith to install good locks on all the bedroom doors after the house had been broken into once while they were away. Now burglars broke in again, and the family were at home. There would not be a second round of locks for the thieves to contend with. Oh, I'm sorry. There would be a second round of locks for the thieves to contend with. Lolo, she said, trying to calm him down, don't ruin my new locks. Finally, he did calm down. his anger spent. Yo-Yo heard their footsteps retreating down the hall. Their door clicked shut. Then muffled voices, her mother's rising in anger and persuasion, her father's deeper murmurs of explanation and self-defense. The house fell silent a moment before Yo-Yo heard, far off, the gun blasts and explosions, the serious, self-important voices of newscasters reporting their TV war. A little while later, there was a quiet knock at Yo-Yo's door, followed by a tentative attempt at the doorknob. "Kikita," her mother whispered. "Open up, Kikita." "Go away," Yo-Yo wailed. They both knew she was glad her mother was there, and needed only a moment's protest to save face. Together they concocted a speech. So, can't figure out what that means. They threw it together and they made it up. Two brief pages of stale compliments and the polite commonplaces on teachers, a speech wrought by necessity and without much invention by mother and daughter late into the night on one of the pads of paper Laura had once used for her own inventions. After it was drafted, Laura typed it up while Yo-Yo stood by, correcting her mother's misnomers and missayings. Yo-Yo came home the next day with the success story of the assembly. The nuns had been flattered. The audience had stood up and given our devoted teachers a standing ovation, what Laura had suggested they do at the end of the speech. She clapped her hands together as Yo-Yo recreated the moment. "I stole that from your father's speech, remember? Remember how he put that in at the end?" She quoted him in Spanish, then translated for Yo-Yo into English. That night, Yo-Yo watched him from the upstairs hall window, where she'd retreated the moment she'd heard his car pull up in front of the house. Slowly her father came up the driveway, a grim expression on his face as he grappled with a large, heavy cardboard box. At the front door he set the package down carefully and patted all his pockets for his house keys. If only he had Laura's ticking keychain. Yo-Yo heard the snapping open of locks downstairs. She listened as he struggled to maneuver the box through the narrow doorway. He called her name several times, but she did not answer him. I wonder what it is. I think there was a little foreshadowing in the earlier part of this story. I think I know what it is. "My daughter, your father, he loved you very much," he explained from the bottom of the stairs. "He just wanted to protect you." Finally, her mother came up and pleaded with Yo-Yo to go down and reconcile with him. "Your father did not mean to harm. You must pardon him. Always it is better to let bygones be forgotten. No?" Downstairs, Yo-Yo found her father setting up a brand new electric typewriter on the kitchen table. Remember, that's something that Yo-Yo had been wanting, and that the mother had been promising for a long time. Now she's got one. It was even better than her mother's. He had outdone himself with all the extra features: a plastic carrying case with Yo-Yo's initials decaled below the handle, a brace, uh, a brace to lift the paper upright while she typed, an erase cartridge, automatic margin tab, a plastic hood like a toaster cover to keep the dust away. Not even her mother could have invented such a machine. But Laura's inventing days were over just as Yo-Yo's were starting up with her school-wide success. Rather than rolling suitcases everyone else in the family remembers, Yo-Yo thinks of the speech her mother wrote as her last invention. It was as if, after that, her mother had passed on to Yo-Yo, her pencil and pad, and said, "Okay, Kukita, here's the buck. You give it a shot." Oh, everything worked out okay. That makes me happy. Well, I hope you enjoyed the story. I did stumble a couple of times, but I don't think I did terribly bad. Um, I I like. I mean, this feels real. That's one thing I like about it. It's like I could see our families like having arguments like this, and where something small like might explode into a vicious argument. But I like the message of like the mother says, the mother's always saying the idioms incorrectly, but she says, let the bygones go away. I think that's what she says. Oh, here it goes. It is better let the bygones be forgotten. The actual expression is let bygones be bygones, but the sentiment is the same. Don't hold on to a grudge. Don't hold on to your anger. Let it go. You want me to sing that? Let it go, let it go. Anyways, all right. I hope that if you needed help with that, hearing it out loud, I hope that helped. Be sure you answer these questions, as you go through the story, and finish the rest of the lessons in the module, and do your best on the quiz. And thank you for listening. And if you have any questions about the story, just let me know. Wow, 40 minutes. It took me 40 minutes to read that. That's crazy. All right, take care. Bye.